Hello everyone and welcome back to my Magic the Gathering Commander Deck List Reviews. So this is a series where I either go through my own personal Commander decks or those submitted by users and break them down to their core mechanics. I'll talk about the Commander, what the deck is generally trying to do, give my critiques, and wrap it all up with my thoughts at the end. If you want to get your own deck list reviewed, make sure to head up to the top link in the description to get it personally reviewed by me. With all that out of the way, let's get into today's episode. Today, we are talking about one of the new Secret Lair cards from the Shadow the Hedgehog Secret Lair. A lot of cool legendary creatures in here to build around. I think they're pretty flavorful. And one of the spicier ones, probably the spiciest one I have to say out of the entire drop, is Shadow the Hedgehog. So Shadow the Hedgehog, of course, is a red-black Rakdos commander. 2 black, 2 red for a 4/2 Hedgehog Mercenary. He's got haste, and whenever it or another creature you control flash or haste dies, draw a card. Then it's got chaos control that says each spell you cast has split second if mana from an artifact was spent to cast it. So of course, flavor being there, you know, like Chaos Emerald, that sort of thing. They even have, as one of the bonuses, a Chaos Emerald as a Lotus Petal. If you use mana from artifacts, like a Chaos Emerald, it's split second because that's kind of his whole thing, is he can stop time. So really cool thing here. A lot of different things we're doing. Of course, gotta go fast is the whole thing here. So he cares about creatures with flash and haste, which is great because we are in Rakdos, especially just the red part of Rakdos. We've got a lot of that, especially the haste side of things. We have tons to go with. It's also kind of aristocratic. There's a lot of different ways you can take this deck, much like with my Sonic deck list. There are so many different things that this card does. So one, he cares about creatures dying, so you could definitely go more the Blood Aristocrats type thing where you're just having creatures die. He cares about creature with flash and haste. That's another part of it. Drawing cards or like Shieldred, that sort of thing, you could definitely go more towards. And of course, giving your spell split second is nice for non-interactability. So if you don't know what split second is, basically, as long as that is on the stack, whatever spell, players can't activate abilities or cast spells. Only triggered abilities go on the stack, and mana abilities can still be activated, but anything that would use the stack as well cannot be activated. So, you know, if someone has something that says, hey, whenever spells is cast, counter that spell, split second will still, you know, get countered, but they can't choose to make any actions with split second on the stack. So that's kind of the weird thing with that, but basically it just makes a spell mostly uninteractable. So that's kind of the big thing here. One big thing I want to note with that, though, is I think almost every, if not every card in the game that naturally has split second on it is instant speed. They're usually just instants. There's a lot of, you know, sudden spoiling, Angel's Grace, that sort of thing. Really well-known spells, but the thing with it is split second does not actually change the speed at which you can cast the spell. So if you are casting a creature spell, just a normal creature spell that doesn't have flash, with Shadow using an artifact to add mana to give the spell split second, that spell does have split second, meaning that it can be interacted with on the stack, but that does not mean you can cast it at instant speed. It can still only be cast, you know, during one of your main phases at sorcery speed while nothing else is on the stack. So that's one very specific little wrinkle. I think some people may have thought this card was even better, thinking that you would just give all your stuff flash, but that's not quite the case. So it's just, it makes stuff harder to interact with rather than, you know, giving stuff the ability to be cast whenever. So that's one thing to think about. But yeah, their treasure tokens, of course, is another big way to sort of build this deck. We're in Rakdos that has a lot of treasure stuff going on. So with this deck, we've got a good amount of all that different type of things happening. And one thing that is definitely important with this card is the fact that the commander draws cards. And so we do have 8 card advantage cards in here, though that might even be considered overkill just because we can draw so many cards from the commander as well. Of course, the only hard part with Shadow is the fact that he's all colored pips and he's 4 of them. So making sure we cast him means that we really want to make sure we get our mana sources. And so having a bit of a more robust mana base is definitely nice for this deck, just because, of course, so much of our deck hinges around casting him. So making sure that turn 4 we can get him out. He's got haste, you can attack with him, or just being able to start our engines is kind of good. But up at top here, we do have 3 board wipes. Vandal Blast, kind of a half board wipe. Of course, it can just be a single target removal spell, or with its overload cost, you can destroy all artifacts. Just kind of one that if you're running red, most of the time you want to have this just, you know, check the boxes of the silver bullets for a lot of those type of decks. You know, Bajuka Bog, you know, exile effects for graveyards, getting rid of artifacts for artifact boards, that sort of thing. Just having ways to deal with certain archetypes, because that's extremely important, because artifacts are extremely strong and just keep getting stronger with every set. We got Blasphemous Act and Toxic Deluge is just sort of our cheap, good full-on board wipe. So Boston's Act, of course, almost always costs just 1 red to cast, to deal 13 damage to each creature. So that can also be nice with our stuff, because board wipes were an Aristocrats deck, so they're a little bit more advantageous for us because we do usually get stuff off of our board wipes. Toxic Deluge also just being good because you can pay mana or pay life into the spell to give everything -X/-X. So not only does that mean we're paying 3 mana to usually get a board wipe that's a lot stronger than 3 mana, and even though we are paying a little bit of life, you can also get around indestructible and protection, that sort of thing, because it is reducing the total power of the creature rather than destroying it or dealing it damage. So that's kind of nice as well. Card advantage, we got a few different things in here. So I really like Brass's Tunnel Grinder. It's a legendary artifact that when it enters, you discard any number of cards and then draw that many +1, so it is straight up card advantage, which is cool. I just kind of like the wheel effect of being able to discard stuff, get a new hand, and you do get a little bit of extra on top of that. And at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a board counter on it, and then once there are 3 or more board counters on it, you remove those counters and transform it. So descending just means a permanent was put into your graveyard from anywhere. So of course, we're Aristocrats. A lot of stuff is going to be going to a graveyard all the time, so this is really easy to trigger. And on the backside, it is just a land that adds red, and whenever you cast a permanent spell with the mana, you discover X or X that spell's mana value, so it's just kind of better cascade. So a little bit of extra there. Mostly just the wheel effect is good enough, but if you can manage to flip it, it does become quite a value engine on the back as well. We've got a few of these Village Rites effects. So straight up Village Rites, just 1 mana black instant as additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature, draw 2 cards. So for sacrificing a creature with, Flash or Haste with her commander out, that's straight up just Ancestral Recall. Being able to draw 3 cards off of that's really, really cool. Deadly Dispute's really nice because it allows you to sacrifice a creature or artifact. So if you have like an extra treasure token, you can do that instead, unless you want, have to sacrifice a creature. It draws 2 cards and creates a treasure token, so you also get a little bit of mana back on the backside of that, so that's nice as well. I don't want to run a whole lot of these in a lot of decks. That's kind of something you got to be wary of, because it is conditional card draw. If you do not have creatures, like if you're drawing this, turn 2 or whatever, it's a lot worse because you usually don't have any board state to sacrifice to, and a lot of times you may just not want to sacrifice any of your creatures at the at the exact moment. So making sure that you have other types of card advantage that are unconditional that allow you to just draw cards is nice, because while these 1 mana to draw 2 is pretty good and gives a sacrifice outlet, if we're not able to meet that requirement of having a creature, it just becomes a dead card in our hand until we can get something out. So definitely something to balance there. So we have Faithless Looting, so 1 mana, draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards, so being able to fill up our graveyard with what we care about. And the flashback, of course, is always nice to be able to cast that again. Night's Whisper and Sun and Blood kind of just being the de facto black draw spells, just drawing us 2 cards and having us lose 2 life. We got Valakut Awakening, which is the exact same as Brass's Tunnel Grinder, except instead of discarding, we're putting that many cards at the bottom and drawing +1. And then on the backside, it can also be in land, so we have a little bit of extra value on top of that. I do prefer Brass's Tunnel Grinder just as an effect. Not only because it's in our, I think something that sits on our battlefield, so we can sack it to something like Deadly Dispute and, has value later on, but the discard can matter because we are sort of putting some value into reanimation, so our graveyard does matter as an extra resource. And then on the backside here, we have Skull Clamp, so of course, just whenever a quick creature dies, draw 2 cards, so again, kind of just a repeatable Village Rites effects. The big thing with Skull Clamp is the fact that 1/1s are very nice with it, because it gives +1/-1, so those creatures automatically die. That's kind of the whole broken part of it, though. If you can't, there's a good amount of other sacrifice outlets in the deck to be able to sacrifice those creatures, or equip it during combat. It dies during combat, whatever. A lot of times that can even be a form of evasion if someone doesn't want to let you draw the 2 cards. If they were to block, they'll just let the creature go through. It's 3 cards with Shadow, so it's even worse for them. Give you sort of a way to get through, because they don't want to give you that much value in a weird way that can kind of, it just makes, anytime you can make an opponent's blocks worse, that's just better for you, and just, is very advantageous. If they really have to think about it, it's like, it's a lose-lose situation. Either I take the damage, that, whatever happens off of that, or they get to draw a bunch of cards even if the creature dies and maybe reanimate it, who knows. So lots of value here, though again, you don't need a whole lot of card advantage in the deck when you have Shadow out. The only thing I will say is, again, he's 4 mana and you have to be able to kill the creatures in some way that you have with him, so it's a little bit harder to get to that card advantage, but having a lot of these at 1, 2, 3 mana that can curve out before him is kind of the nice part. And for this deck, I would consider this deck bracket 4 for sure. I've got it listed as that because we are running 2 combos. So the very easy one here is Kikis Conscripts. So Kiki has haste. You can tap it to create a token that's a copy of target non-legendary creature you control. That token gains haste, sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. So this is a cool one just for the deck in general, because not only does it have haste, so if it ever dies, we get stuff off of it, but you get to copy something give that token haste, it automatically sacrifices itself, so we always get to draw a card. So this is just kind of another card advantage engine in a way, on top of just being, whatever creatures we have, we can get more value off of them. So that's really nice, but yeah, getting that, having that shadow sort of synergy is really cool there. But of course, it's just a great card in general, which is why we're running Zell's Conscript. So 5 mana, 3/3. Not only does it have haste, so it's just a good creature for the deck. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that permanent. It gains haste till end of turn. So for just this card by itself without any sort of, game breaking stuff, you could steal opponent's creature, give it haste, have it attack. If it dies, you still get to draw the card because you gave it haste. So that's kind of cool. Though the real thing with this is the weird way that the rules work with gaining control of a permanent, and just the way that targeting works. So Kikijiki can create a token of a target non-legendary creature you control. So normally what you want to have is Kikijiki on the battlefield, and then you cast and have Zell's Conscripts enter the battlefield. Zell's Conscripts has to choose a target, and what you target, weirdly enough, is Kikijiki. So there are a few redundant rules you can use in the game. So one of them being that you can just target permanents if it is a valid target, even if the target does nothing. There are certain decks like Orvar decks that can make use of that. Or you can tap a tapped creature, untap an untapped creature. It does not hinge on whatever state the card is in, as long as there is a card to target and it's a valid target. It doesn't matter what the card is doing. So with Zell's Conscripts, even though we do already control Kikijiki, we can technically target it to gain control of it. But what matters here is we untap that creature and give it haste. So the untapping means that whenever Zell's Conscript enters, we create a copy of Kikijiki. We then untap Kikijiki. One of them dies, whatever they legend rule themselves. You then tap Kikijiki to make another copy of our original Zell's Conscripts. That one enters, untaps Kikijiki, whatever. You keep going. You make an infinite number of Zell's Conscripts. They are 3/3s with haste, and then you kind of just swing out and you win the game. The only thing that might kind of be a weird thing here is you are having a bunch of creatures die, so you got to be sort of careful with Shadow out, because you would just end up drawing your whole deck. So you got to be a little careful there. It's on a May ability, so that can be something that may end up killing you. So you got to be a little careful with the way that you end up doing that, to not draw yourself out. Though even if you can mass a similar, like a slightly large board state, that by itself would be good. And even if you end up stopping this loop at some point, it basically just says draw however many cards you want in your deck, and then you have a bunch of creatures to swing with. So even if you're not going fully infinite with this combo, it's just extremely good. Very well-known combo, very powerful. We also have the Gravecrawler combo. So Gravecrawler is a 1 mana 2/1, can't block, and you may cast this card from your graveyard as long as you control a zombie. So being able to cast creatures from the graveyard is pretty powerful, because you can do a lot of different loops with those creatures, but mainly with Warren Soul Trader. It itself is a zombie, so you basically want Gravecrawler on the battlefield or in the graveyard, and Warren Soul Trader also on the battlefield. It has an activate ability that says pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature, create a treasure token. So treasure token immediately gives you mana, so you can sacrifice Gravecrawler to Warren Soul Trader. You do lose a life. That goes to the graveyard. You get a treasure token out of the deal because you control a zombie with Warren Soul Trader. You can immediately sack the treasure you just made to cast Gravecrawler and repeat that as many times as you want. Of course, you are losing life. There's a few ways to gain life in the deck, but basically what you're doing with that combo, when you have if you have Shadow out and you have some sort of a mass way to give Gravecrawler haste or something like that, you can just keep drawing cards. It's a little contingent on a few different things, though there are some Blood Artist effects in this deck, and if you want to more pivot towards this combo, you very much could. I already had Warren Soul Trader in here because it's just a good sack outlet. You might as well add Gravecrawler to have the full combo, though you don't really need both of them. You could totally just run Warren Soul Trader, though I thought you might as well throw it in here just to have the full combo. And it is a little bit, like I said, a bit to build up because you need these two cards, you need Shadow, and then you need some way to give Gravecrawler haste, so something like Fire Crystal or, Rising of the Day, that sort of thing. And Anger in the graveyard to be able to give it haste eternally so you can draw cards off of it, or at the very least some way to go life neutral or life positive, like a Blood Artist on the battlefield, so that this becomes a combo that you're like, okay, I'm going to drain everyone for infinite, and that's the game. So kind of the thing there. There are, a few iterations you can do with this, but this is mostly what we're looking for here. You definitely don't have to include the combo if you're not wanting to do that. Bump this down a bracket to bracket 3 if you want to kind of get rid of that. But I thought, it's a very strong commander. There's a lot we can do with it. Especially the fact that with these sort of combos, especially the Gravecrawler combo, because we're using that treasure token to cast it. If we have Shadow out and we're doing the full combo, there's no point that the card can be countered because of split second. So it makes it really hard to interact if you do run combos in here. Like if you're running World Gorge or Animate Dead, that becomes a little bit harder to initially get rid of because of the split second. So just another way that this definitely acts as a combo deck because it has that built-in protection. We got a few copy effects, so that's definitely another thing you can add in here because especially with red, a lot of the copiers, they make something with haste, it attacks and then it's sacked at the end of combat or at the end of turn. So we're getting stuff with haste that we can attack with, they die, we draw cards off of them, so those can be extremely powerful. So of course Jax is the Troublemaker. I really like this one because it can be blitzed in, which just basically says it gets haste, and then at the end of turn you sack it, and when you do, you draw a card. So if you just blitz it in, you just have a creature with haste. When it dies, you draw a card off of Shadow and you draw a card off itself for the blitz cost. So that can be kind of nice. Just draw two, have a creature on board for a turn, sack it to whatever maybe, and then you get to draw the 2 cards. So that by itself would be pretty good. But Jaxus also has an ability that says pay a red, tap it, discard a card, create another a token that's a copy of another target creature you control. It gains haste, and when this creature dies, draw a card, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step, activate only as a sorcery. So it basically just gives another card. You basically get a blitzed copy of whatever card. So that can be nice if you blitz this in. You can immediately give it haste, pay 1 mana, get another copy of another creature on your battlefield. Maybe you want an extra Gravecrawler or Zealous Conscripts or whatever. One of our other creatures, give that haste, be able to attack with it and whatever to get just a whole bunch of value, draw a whole bunch of cards for, not a whole lot of mana. So that's nice. Saw in Half, I'd throw this in so many of my different decks because I think it's just such a good card and does so much for what we're looking for. So it's a 3-mana instant that says destroy target creature. If that creature dies this way, its controller creates 2 copies of it, except their power and toughness is half that creature's power and toughness rounded up. So if you have, a creature that you want to have 2 of or has an ETB trigger, or if you just want to have 2 of them, so like Loyal Apprentice is a good one. Saw this in Half. You get 2 1/1s because it does round up, so you're never going to make it so like, oh, I kill a 1/1, they just both die instantly because it's rounding up every time, so that's kind of nice. 1/1s will always have into 1/1s. Having an extra one of him would be cool. You have that, you get 2 of them, you get a death trigger off of whatever for killing the creature. It can also be used as a removal spell. Let's say someone's trying to kill your Loyal Apprentice or kill one of your things, and you're like, okay, in response, I'm going to kill my thing instead. Fills with their spell, get your value. So kind of just use it in that way. But having 2 of these, they make 2 Thopters on your turn. Just whatever way you want to get that extra value. We are running quite a few legendary creatures, so it doesn't work as well as it could have, though I think there's a lot in here that you would also just, generically use it for. Or if you wanted to, bargain piece with someone else, like, hey, I can saw in half one of your great ETB creatures and give you some extra value for whatever. Just very versatile. That's what I really like about it. So I think it's an awesome include. And then we also have the Fire Crystal. So the copy effect on here is the 6 mana at the bottom. So you can pay 4 and 2 red, tap it, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. Of course, 6 mana for 1 copy that we do, is not permanent anyway, is pretty bad. But the fact that it's on something that does, a whole bunch of extra stuff is kind of our big thing. It makes our red spells cost 1 less, and it gives our creatures haste. So all that wrapped together is just a really, really good card, and one of the better ones for the deck. And of course, like I said, we are caring about creatures that enter, attack, and then die, or just enter with haste. And so there's a lot of good ways to do that with creature tokens. So Chandra, Acolyte of Flame, sort of a weird one because it is more of a, I would say, a Super Friends card because its first 0 ability says put a loyalty counter on each red planeswalker you control. But really we care about the second 0. It's just a repeatable way to get tokens. It says create 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens. They gain haste, it means the next end step sacrifice them. So it's just the exact same wording that we care about every time. Or we get creatures with haste, we can attack with them. Even if we don't, we sack them, we draw cards from them. So that basically just says pay 0, draw 2 cards with Shadow out, which is pretty awesome. But just kind of generically good card. You can use its other abilities if you really wanted to, though I just think that one, having a permanent you can just continually make tokens off of is good enough. We got Force of Rage, which is one of the forces you don't really see a whole lot. So it says, if it's not your turn, you may exile a red card from your hand rather than pay the spell's mana cost. You create 2 3/1 red elemental creature tokens with trample and haste. You sacrifice those tokens at the beginning of your next upkeep. So this is just an easy way to get, if you want to, free tokens, 2 3/1s with trample and haste. So get a little bit of damage in maybe, but of course draw those cards. For, maybe 2 cards, you pay 2 cards into it to draw 2 new cards without paying any mana. So that can be kind of nice, kind of just a redraw effect for, basically free if you do pay that cost. So that's kind of nice. Otherwise, it's kind of just a red divination for us, paying 3 mana to get to draw 2 cards with a little bit of extra value on top of that, of course. But again, kind of just another good one. Lagomos, a Hand of Hatred. So this is a 3 mana 1/3. Beginning of your comment on your turn, you create a 2 red elemental with haste, with trample on haste. It's basically just the same token, except it loses a power. Sacrifices at the beginning of an extend step, and then you can tap it to search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Activate only if 5 or more creatures died this turn. So it demonic tutors if 5 creatures have died, which is also really cool. So this is just a way not only that we're getting repeatable tokens on our turn, but we're also getting a little bit of extra value if we can manage to hit that threshold, which there's a lot of ways in the deck that we're able to do. 5 creatures is not that hard to do, and getting that powerful effect of just a straight up tutor on a stick is very cool as well. Talk about Loyal Apprentice a little bit. So it's a 2 mana 2 with haste, so by itself just allows us to draw cards off of it, and also has Lieutenant. Says at the beginning of your comment on your turn, if you control your commander, create a 1/1 colorless stop your artifact creature token with flying. That token gets haste on the turn. So again, just another thing that we can make tokens that have haste that we can attack with, and then if they die, they die. Song of Totentan. So this is another one you can do, is just these mass creators that create a bunch of tokens, the X spells that also have haste. So Song of Totentan says create a X/1/1 black rat creature tokens with this creature can't block. Creatures you control gain haste on the turn. So those tokens technically don't have haste, which is the only downside, is the fact that they gain haste on a turn, so if they don't die right then and you have nothing else that gives haste, they won't draw you cards the next turn, though just by itself giving our stuff haste can be kind of nice. Even if you're paying 1 red for this, you're like, okay, I need my creatures to have haste right now, we're going to attack, whatever. I like that kind of modality of it, though of course just the 1/1 rats that we can immediately attack with, they can't block, so you might as well attack with them. And just, have a big turn of either swinging out with someone trying to get a bunch of damage in, or, just getting to draw a bunch of cards. Then over here we have Tempt with Vengeance. So this is one of the tempting offer cards where you basically, people can create tokens, and if you do, you get the effect. So it's like, okay, each opponent, I'll get this effect, each opponent gets the effect, and then for each one that got the effect, I get an additional version of that effect. So this one says create X/1/1 red elemental creature tokens with haste. Each opponent may also create that many elemental creature tokens with haste. For each opponent who does, you also create that many. So if each opponent, let's say you pay 5 into this, you get 5 elementals, and each opponent chooses to get 5 elementals, you get an additional 15. So you get a total of 20, and they get a total of 5 each. So we don't really care about our opponents getting a whole bunch of tokens. It doesn't really matter for us, because we're going to be swinging out with them. And of course, the big thing here is a lot of people may not even take the deal, because if they do, you're getting however many tokens they have plus a number that you would originally get. So you get double, So that's kind of the big thing. This is a great sort of politic piece where you're able to be like, okay, we got one problem person on the board. Hey, I'll give you these tokens if you give me the tokens back, and then we can swing out with them and try to get this person into the game. So that's another thing you can be used for. I do like the political aspect of that. And then lastly here we have Urbass Forge, which is again just kind of a repeatable token creation that also has its own sack. So it's a 3-mana artifact that says at the beginning of combat on your turn, you put an oil counter on it, then create an X1 red fire exchange creature horror token with trample and haste, where X is the number of oil counters on it. Sacrifice that token in the beginning of the next end step. So it creates a 1/1 one turn, then a 2/1, 3/1, 4/1, 5/1, whatever. So it always stays at an X1, though it has trample, so it just that starts hurting more and more and more. It has trample and haste, so even if it dies during combat, you still get to draw the card, and then it sacks itself at the beginning of the end step. So even if you don't attack with it, just you're getting to draw a card each turn. So that by itself is pretty nice. Haste enabler. So a lot of our creatures just generically have haste. So outside of a few different cards, we don't have a whole lot in here that give haste. Some of them are just good. So anger, one of them, just an extremely good one. Very easy. You just discard it in some sort of a way or mill it, whatever wheel. Put this into the graveyard, and then as long as it's in the graveyard and you control a mountain, your creatures have haste. So this is a 0 mana way to give creatures haste, though I guess technically if you needed to, it is a haste creature. So it's a very bad haste creature because it's 4 mana. It's a 4 mana 2/2. But if you had to cast this also would draw you cards and synergize with the deck. So that's kind of just an extra thing on top of that, though, of course, the real thing we want to do with this card is be able to put it in the graveyard in some sort of way to give all of our other stuff haste. Enduring Courage is really cool. I like the Enduring Cycle just because it gets an extra life in some sort of a way. So it's a 4 mana 3/3 with whenever another creature you control enters, it gets +2/+0 and gains haste on a turn. So again, just sort of that initial way to gain haste. Again, this is something where if the creature doesn't immediately die, it only gets haste on a turn. So if on a later turn it dies, it does not get to draw you cards because it no longer is haste. But by that itself, just, if you're able to combine Endure Encourage with, Song of Totem Towns, you're making 3/1 rats instead of 2/1 or 1/1 rats. So that's a lot better. You're tripling the power of those creatures. The haste doesn't matter much because you're specifically getting haste with this card, but just a way to buff the creatures that are immediately entering, which is cool. And then whenever this dies, if it was a creature, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. It's an enchantment, so it loses the creature type. So it kind of goes along with our aristocrat stuff. So this does die if we have give it haste in some sort of way, or if it dies to a board, like whatever. We get whatever effects off of that, and then it just comes back and sits on the board as an enchantment, so we don't really care about it dying. So it can be just kind of an extra protective piece, which I think is really cool. Lightninggreaves just as a way to give one creature haste, and the Shroud can be nice to protect whatever we need to. We're like, okay, can very much tell someone's waiting to destroy this creature in some sort of way, or usually just with Shadow, be able to keep that on the board. Mostly the fact that it's like, okay, I need to give a creature haste, I'm able to switch this around and do whatever I need to. Just sort of as a single target for the stuff that we need. I already talked about Fire Crystal, but it's awesome that it has a cost reduction on it. So give our red spells one less to cast, and we have mostly red spells in the deck. And then of course the just universal haste for all of our creatures is very nice on top of that. So kind of just all over the place. There's a lot of different stuff for the deck, which is really nice. Interaction, not a whole lot of interaction. I've said this in a lot of my videos, but I don't have a super interaction heavy meta. There's just not a whole lot running around, so you don't have to deal with too much. You could totally pump this up very easily. It's not hard to add a whole lot of extra, destruction spells. We do have 3 board wipes. It's something to kind of take into consideration. So if you include all that, that's 10. But that might be a little under what you're looking for. So you could totally pump this up very easily if you wanted to add. Even like Tibalt's Trickery I would add, or a Deflecting Swat or Deadly Rollick, if you want to get a little more expensive with it. But I think for this is fine for what it is. So Chaos Orb, just kind of our catch-all, be able to shuffle any permanent to our opponent's library, or even our library if you really need to. Just going to get rid of anything. Feed the Swarm and Withering Torment are 2 ways to destroy either creatures or enchantments. One of the only ways to destroy enchantments in our colors, so that's kind of nice there. Go over the throat, destroy target non-artifact creature, just hits most creatures. It's Mischief, sort of our a budget deflecting swat, so it's a 2-mana instant. It says change the target of target spell with a single target. You lose life equal to that spell's mana value. This can be great as sort of a counter spell, because you can change the target of a counter spell to Imp's Mischief. And then once the counter spell resolves, it fizzles because there's no target, because Imp's Mischief is off the stack. So you can use that in that way, or if someone's going to Swords to Plowshares, one of your things. It's just a good way to get rid of stuff and kind of protect your board a little bit. Infernal Grasp just destroys any creature, you lose 2 life. And then Terminate, destroy target creature can't be regenerated. So again, just a lot of good generic destruction spells and single target removal for most of our interaction. In terms of lands, we do have quite the mana base here, partially because we are running both Filth and Anger, so you want to make sure we have our basic land types, because it's just extremely important for what we're using. We also do have a lot of artifact lands, because again, Shadow cares about mana being cast from any artifact source, which includes artifact lands. So in terms of that, we have Darksteel Citadels, an indestructible one. We also got Urbass Forge Bridge is not only a way to have artifact lands, it's indestructible if that ends up mattering, but gives us both our colors as well. Great Furnace, as well as Vault of Whispers, as just our generically good artifact lands as well. Treasure Vault, being able to not only have this enter as something we can cast, but make treasure tokens if we need to. And then also Scene of the Crime. Just a lot of different ways, you might as well add in some of these artifact lands just to be able to sort of have that split second whenever you need it. Just a easy way to turn that on more than anything. And another thing with having our land types is we have stuff like Blazemire Verge that cares about having specific land types on the battlefield. We have Rocketeer. I do like having the Surveil land, because again, we are sort of a graveyard deck, so we care about putting stuff into the graveyard. Dragonskull Scum cares about having Swamp Around enter untapped. And Arena of Glory, I really like this one as well. So it's just a way to give creatures haste and enters to untapped if you control a mountain. And then of course on top of all of that, we also have Cabal Coffer. So making sure that we have our land types makes us a whole lot more powerful, a lot easier, becomes less of a dead card. And sort of our one of our more expensive includes in here Urborg, just because again we are running Filth, so that's the big thing. Filth, as long as it's in the graveyard, it gives our creatures Swamp Walk, so giving all of our opponents swamps makes all of our creatures unblockable, which is kind of a big thing for what we're trying to do. But besides that, just got a lot of good synergy. We also have, Sokenzan that we can channel to make 1/1s with haste. So another way to just get tokens out there. Midgar, City of Mako. So this is just another Villagers effects. We can sacrifice an artifact or creature if we do draw 2 cards. Mines of Moria, we can, it enters tapped unless you control a legendary creature, and you can pay for, tap it, exile 3 cards from your graveyard, create 2 treasure tokens that we can use to split second or whatever. So just a lot of big synergy pieces in here, just ways that we can get a little bit of extra value off of the land side of things. You might as well. Just a lot of good stuff. Trying not to run too many colorless sources. We got like Treasure Vault, Reliquary Tower, Darksteel Citadel, but we're trying not to run too many of those because, like I said, we really want to make sure that we're able to have all of our colored pips, because Shadow, is all colored mana and is very mana intensive. And even not having a whole lot of monocolored stuff, like we only are running 6 basics in the entire deck, because it does really matter to get him out as soon as possible, because we really want to turn on our engine as fast as possible. Speaking of, we do have a little bit of ramp in here, not a crazy amount, because we have a lot of other ways to get creatures out, and our curve is actually extremely low, so that's another big part of it. We got our staples in here, so Arcane Signet, Soul Ring, Talisman of Indulgence, and Fellwar Stone is our mana rocks. Dark Ritual, Mana Geyser, we talked about Fire Ritual, gives us a reduction on red spells. Jessica's Will is one of our game changers. Again, just adds us mana and gives us card advantage, which is really cool. Dark Ritual, because we're in black, you might as well. But a really cool one I like in here is Burnt Offering. I don't see this card enough. I think it's really cool, though. It's a 1-mana instant that says sacrifice a creature to add red or black to your mana pool in any combination of colors equal to that card's mana value. So if if you're sacking a 2/2, you can make 2 black, 2 red, or a combination of black and red. So just a ritual in and of itself, which is kind of nice if we got a creature we want to have down, but we want it dead. Like if you do have to end up casting Anger, this is a good way to immediately be able to sack it, get your mana back, get whatever triggers off of death triggers, and just get a little bit of extra value off of it. I just really like this type of card. I think it's kind of a fun one. And of course, we have a lot of stuff dying, so we do have a good amount of cards dedicated to reanimation. So we do have a sort of soft reanimation spells, what I like to call these, with Malachite Rebirth. It's a 1-mana instant that says choose target creature, you lose 2 life. Until end turn, that creature gains. When this creature dies, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So this is a cool one because it works in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of these, like Not Dead After All and that sort of thing, that gain the text of when it dies, it comes back. It's great for interaction if someone's just has some sort of destruction spell or damage spell, or you cast your own board wipe. If some way your creature would be to die, you can cast this in response because it is instant speed. Give the creature that ability. It would die and then comes back, so you're sort of fizzling whatever spell, and of course getting whatever triggers off of your stuff. So it can be an interaction piece if you use it that way. Though mostly it's like, okay, I want to sack this creature and have it come right back, either to get keep the creature on the battlefield, but have had give myself the ability to sacrifice the creature but still have it stick around, or have ETB triggers, dead triggers, whatever. So there's a lot of versatility here, and of course having it be a land on the backside is also really nice. We've got Animate Dead. Necromancy is just our ways to reanimate stuff from the graveyard attached to a permanent. So Necromancy is cool because you can flash it in, and if you do, you have to sacrifice the permanent. So if you want, again, it's kind of just the same thing where we can kind of blink in a creature from our graveyard. This sort of being the opposite. Instead of having it on the battlefield and come back, it goes from the graveyard to battlefield to the graveyard. I just like being able to flash stuff in if you really need to. I think that's a cool thing. If not, it just sticks around like Animate Dead attached to a creature, so it's reanimation target. Though, of course, we also care about stuff dying, so this can be an upside even, having to sacrifice the creature, so that's kind of cool. We got Reanimate is, again, just kind of our unconditional way to reanimate stuff. That the whole architect is named after it. These are kind of cool, though, because a lot of these effects, like Reanimate, Animate Dead, and I believe Necromancy, there's a lot of text on this card, but we can animate anything. So you can choose an opponent's stuff if someone's got a really cool creature in their graveyard, like an Archon of Cruelty, or maybe some sort of Eldrazi, who knows, something crazy in their graveyard, you're able to reanimate that as well if you want to. So having that versatility is really cool, especially if you're playing more towards mill or discard or something like that. Like Wheels, not only to fill up your graveyard, but fill up your opponent's graveyard. These cards become a lot more valuable because you're able to steal from them as well. Speaking of Dread Return, I run this in a lot of my reanimation decks because it's really nice to have. It's 4 mana sorcery that says return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, which 4 mana is pretty overpriced for that, but it has flashback, so if it's in the graveyard, you can sacrifice 3 creatures to cast it from there, so it's free. It just costs 3 creatures instead of mana, which is nice. And sacrificing those creatures as well can be an upside, as sort of a pseudo sack outlet, and then it also reanimates something as well, so kind of just all over the place, a lot of good stuff there. Victimize, another really good reanimation spell. You choose 2 target creature cards in your graveyard, sacrifice a creature. If you do, return the chosen cards to the battlefield tapped. So you sacrifice a creature to reanimate 2 creatures, which is really, really cool. It's worded in such a way that the sacrifice creature is not able to be targeted with the effect, which I think is, good. Otherwise, you'd just be able to get this kind of for free. but a way to not only sacrifice creatures, but also to get reanimation. I like having both of those on the same card. I think is really valuable. And sort of a weird one in here, we have Underworld Breach. So it says each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost, plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. So you can just play cards from your graveyard by paying the costs. That's just what escape is. It just allows you to pay from cast from graveyard, which is really big. There's like Yawgmoth's Will if you wanted to run in here, though that's reserve list and extremely expensive. So this is kind of our baby version of what we're trying to do. So normally Underworld Breach is something that is a combo, which doesn't really have to be the case with this deck. This is mostly just a way to give one turn reanimate anything from the graveyard, which is really cool. I also like that this is non-land card, so this is sort of the very pumped up version of this, where it doesn't have to just be permanents you grab from the graveyard. You could recast all of your other stuff in there as well. If you do have a wheel, you can keep, putting mana into like a rituals. You could go infinite in some sort of way and like mill your whole deck if you wanted to. Though mostly the one turn being able to just keep casting stuff from our graveyard, I think is kind of the big thing here. Just sort of using this more for value, which I think is kind of fun, being able to use these busted cards for maybe not as busted of a purpose, but yeah, again, just kind of generically good. Got some sack outlets in here. Not a crazy amount. You can definitely add like an altar dimension if you wanted to, just to have more in here. We got Ashnod's Altar and Phyrexian Altar as ways to get mana off of it. Technically War and Soul Trader as well, though it comes back in the form of a treasure token and loses this life, so you want to be kind of careful there. But just a little bit of extra. You could consider this ramping if you really wanted to, but mostly the sacrifice is the big thing there. Also, if you wanted to, if you had some sort of other zombie on the battlefield instead of War and Soul Trader, having a Phyrexian Altar to be able to cast a Gravecaller combo could also work. Goblin Bombardment is a way to sacrifice creatures to deal damage to any target, so it's kind of, I think, one of our better sack outlets just because it also does damage, and that's sort of part of the deck is getting in with damage. So if you're attacking with a bunch of creatures, they die or whatever would be blocked, you can sacrifice them instead, still get your triggers, whatever, but still be able to get through with some sort of damage, which is awesome. And Viscerous here as a way to sacrifice creatures to scry one. There's a whole lot of these effects, and I think we're even getting some new ones with some of the new sets, which is really cool. A lot of ways to just have sack outlets. Instant speed is such a big thing if you've never really run a lot of these. Having them in an aristocrat sort of deck is extremely good because it just instant speed and repeatable is really the big thing. Being able to do that whenever you want and however much you want is kind of the very best part of it. And of course, if you're doing your Kiki combo, Goblin Bombardment, you can just sacrifice the creature. Infinites are good for a reason. When you go infinite with anything, it's usually pretty good, but these kind of just give you an extra way to use that mana as well. Treasures, like I said, there's sort of a treasure sub thing you can definitely run a lot more of in the deck. I'm not running a whole lot of just because there's a lot of other things you can be doing with it. So War and Soul Trader, of course, creates treasure tokens. We have Professional Facebreaker. We are trying to get in damage, so he's pretty nice. He's got menace, and whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token. You can sacrifice a creature or sacrifice a treasure token to exile the top card of your library if you may play that card this turn. So just Impulse Draw, which is kind of cool. So if you are making a little bit of treasures, he of course also makes treasures, and if you're attacking all 3 of your opponents, you get 3 treasure tokens, which is nice, which is very easy to do with the number of creatures we're making and attacking with. But just another way to kind of get some card advantage. Knuckles, one of the other cards from the Secret Lair drop. It's a 4-mana 2/4 with double strike, trample, and haste. It says whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token. So of course we're trying to get in with damage. He's really cool because he has double strike and trample, so he's able to get in damage a lot easier. And because he has double strike, he at least, if he's able to get in, is making you 2 treasure tokens. So that's really cool. And he's got haste, so if he ends up dying, we also get to draw off of Shadow. And he has Treasure Hunter. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 30 more artifacts, you win the game. So there's a lot of ways you can do that in lands. We have, some just generically good artifacts. Seeing in the main board, treasure tokens, that could be something you could get to. You could add in like Revel in Riches or Reign in Riches and whatever if you're going towards more of the treasure thing. So I just think as a card, it's flavorful because he's from the same drop and he cares about kind of all the other stuff that Shadow does. So I think it's just a good synergy piece. Grim Hireling, again, whenever one more creatures you control to a combat damage to a player, you create 2 treasure tokens instead of 1, which is nice. And you can pay a black, sacrifice X treasures. Target creature gets -X/-X till end turn, activate only as a sorcery. So you could also gives us treasure tokens when we attack and deal damage. And then also you could use this as sort of a removal spell if you really needed to. Though most of the time, just getting the treasure tokens is good enough. We also do have a little bit of tutoring in the deck, not a whole lot. Of course, we care about our graveyard, so Entomb and Buried Alive, being able to just put creatures in our graveyard. Basically just a demonic tutor, if not better a lot of times for what we're doing. Be able to put, turn on our filth and hatred, or filth and anger if we really want to, or just have, it's like, okay, I want to be able to reanimate a creature, I'm going to put it in the graveyard to be able to immediately bring back. Besiege the Meter's really cool in this deck. So it's got bargain. You may sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token as you cast the spell. It says you search your library for a card, exile it face down, then shuffle. If the spell was bargained, you may cast that exiled card without paying its mana cost. If the spell is mana value 4 or less, otherwise put it into your hand. So this is very easy to bargain. So it's basically just, hey, pay 4 mana for a 4 mana spell or less. You're able to basically cast any 4 mana spell or less from your deck for free. And just kind of gives you that ability to cast whatever. And like I said, I think a good 80%, 90% of our deck is 4 CMC or less. You're able to basically get whatever you want, which is really cool. And again, like I said, bargaining is very easy because we're controlling a lot of artifacts with our stuff, though, even if you're getting rid of tokens or whatever, that could even be another way to use as a sack outlet. So a lot of cool stuff there. And we also have Diabolic Intent, which is just a demonic tutor, except it also has the text as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature. So we're getting to sack a creature on top of being able to tutor. So again, just all upside really for what we're doing. And lastly, here we do have a little bit of value. So we are running 2 aristocrats in here, so kind of just the 2 you would always run. So Blood Artist and Zulaport Cutthroat. Whenever creatures die, opponents either lose life or get dealt damage, so that's kind of good. We've talked about Filth a whole lot. It's kind of our other incarnation we're running. As long as it's in the graveyard and you control a swamp, creatures you control swamp block. So of course, the biggest thing is having this in the graveyard with an Urborg out, because it just makes all your creatures unblockable. That's really, really nice. Kind of just another generically good card. Bolas's Citadel is our last game changer in here. So it's a 6 mana legendary artifact. You may look at the top card of your library at any time, and you may pay lands and cast spells from the top of your library. If you cast spells this way, you pay life instead of mana value. So that's kind of cool. It basically lets you free cast. This is a very well-known, very good card. Though I do like with this deck, not only is it just a good, generically good card, the last actual activated ability matters for us. So it says tap it, sacrifice 10 non-land permanents, each opponent loses 10 life. So this is a good way if we really want to, usually sort of like a game ender thing. Like, okay, I'm gonna sacrifice a bunch of non-land permanents, get a bunch of triggers, usually creatures, draw a bunch of cards, maybe you have a Blood Artist, Zulaport Cutthroat, drain a bunch of extra life, and then opponents all lose life. So this is a good way to knock opponents down 10 life at the very least, get value for yourself. And a lot of times this is just the game ender. We're like, okay, everyone's at a pretty low amount of health, I'm just gonna do this, have everyone lose a bunch of life, and someone ends up dying, or they're low enough where you can get in for the win. So it's kind of another thing here. And then one of our other sort of cards that I didn't put in a different category because it kind of just does a whole bunch for this deck is Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So it's a 3 mana enchantment that has 3 saga abilities. At the first lore counter, you create a 2/2 Red Goblin Shaman creature token, which that says whenever this creature attacks, create a treasure token. So there's a little bit of token creation there, or treasure token specifically. 2, you may discard up to 2 cards if you do draw that many cards. So kind of just a reverse Faithless Looting, kind of nice. And then its third trigger, it transforms into basically just Kiki-Jiki. It's a reflection of Kiki-Jiki. It's a 2/2, colorless, and tap it to create a token that's a copy of another target non-legendary creature you control, except as haste, sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. So this is kind of just a fixed Kiki-Jiki. Technically, if you do have some sort of way to keep generating mana off of this, if you have reflections of Kiki-Jiki, you have our little guy up here. If we've got, basically the whole combo, if you're able to have Kikis Conscripts, reflections, and then you have specifically Astronaut's Altar that creates 2 colorless mana, because with this you have to pay a mana every time you're using his ability. You can still do it. You basically just sacrifice one of the Kikis Conscripts tokens you're making to have 2 colorless mana. You tap Kiki-Jiki using one of that mana. You create a token copy, and then basically the next token copy is free, so you're still up 1 every single time. You're getting 2 mana off of it. For Phyrexian Altar, it would just go neutral. You'd just be making a bunch of copies, which again, you might just use that to draw a bunch of cards with Shadow. Maybe not an easy way there, but if you do have those specific cards, you are also able to go infinite with this, though most of the time, this is going to take 3 turns to flip, so that's kind of I think the most convoluted, hard to get to combo. If you end up pulling that off, awesome, but just by itself, again, kind of just a good ability to have that allows us to get a bunch of extra value. But yeah, that is the Shadow the Hedgehog deck. So mostly aristocrats, got a lot of haste stuff, kind of just getting in with some of our creatures in here. I think it's kind of a fun one. I really like a lot of these Sonic the Hedgehog cards. I hope everyone that wanted to get this Secret Lair was able to get it. It was actually up for, I think, 2 days. I don't know if it's fully sold out yet. But I know it didn't immediately sell out. People like the Final Fantasy, where people are actually given at least a little bit of time to get into it. So I really do hope everyone's managed to get it. They even managed to ship it out early to some people. So there's just so many cool cards. And of course, the big thing with this drop is the fact that they're all mechanically unique, or at least most of them are. All these legendary creatures, so you can't get these cards in any other capacity. These aren't just reskins, so allowing people to play with those cards as well is really nice. Maybe we get some universes within reprints. We haven't seen a lot of those lately. I hope people manage to pull the colored Chaos Emeralds or whatever. I think those would be really cool to see. I'm excited to see how they kind of do that in person. I think it's a really slam dunk of a Secret Lair, especially the fact that it didn't sell quite as immediately. I do still think it's kind of stupid that these aren't, print on demand. They're still just get them while you can, sort of limited availability. But at least this time you had a little bit more of a chance, so I hope that ends up working out. But besides that, I also hope you have all enjoyed this video. Kind of just a fun deck. If you want to check out the deck list, I will leave a link to the Moxfield link in the description below. If you want to check out any of my other deck lists that I've done on any of the other videos, I will leave a link to that YouTube playlist as well. Besides all of that, I will see all of you beautiful people in the next one.